This is One Voice Lenawee. Stay informed. COVID vaccinations and booster shots. How does this affect our children, finances, and the cost of living, race, and the fight for equity and equality? What will education look like in the future? What you should know about good health practices, employment, and job interviews in today's world. You need to know. Stay connected. One Voice Lenawee. Access to the information you've been looking for. Sponsored by United Way of Monroe and Lenawee counties. Now we present to you our host, D'Angelo Boone. Welcome to One Voice Lenawee, and we thank you for joining us this evening, and we encourage you to join us every second Monday and fourth Monday right here at 6 p.m. on YouTube. And if you haven't hit that YouTube subscribe button, take the opportunity to do that right now. Do not wait for later. Hit that button right now. And if you have any thoughts or any ideas for upcoming shows, please jot that in the comment section. We would love to hear from you. And again, we welcome you. And also we thank our sponsor, United Way of Monroe and Lenawee counties, for sponsoring our show, and everyone in our viewing audience. Again, thank you for joining us. And tonight we have with us Frank Nagel, Director of Community Impact in Michigan with ProMedica. Welcome, Frank, to the show.
Thank you for having me, D'Angelo. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time. I can only imagine how busy your schedule has to be nowadays.
Just like everybody else, but all good work and all good things, especially when it's surrounded by community partners and our residents. So really excited to be able to do this work and to be able to connect with everybody.
Thank you. And again, thank you for coming to the show. And so there was a press conference that was a few weeks ago, maybe a month or so ago.
Yeah. And
the conversation that is buzzing all around community is the Ebied Neighborhood Promise.
Yeah.
So that press conference dealt with that, and this is a $20 million venture that's coming to Adrian. So could you just explain to me, what is the Ebied Neighborhood Promise?
Yeah. So the ProMedica has been working for over a decade on initiatives related to social determinants of health. And even beyond that, we've been working on community health related initiatives. And it's really centered around being able to address the factors that are affecting the health and well-being of people, and more specifically our communities. And so the Ebied Neighborhood Promise came to fruition because what we were seeing is that there's health disparities and health inequities within many communities across the country, right? But the communities that ProMedica is serving. And so to be able to really look intentionally at how do we bring community together to really start to make impact on these long-term health outcomes. You know, we can't do it alone. No organization can do it alone.
Right.
And so what it really started to cultivate is a model that is more comprehensive, that focuses on partnerships, and that's community driven. You know, it moves us away from our community organization sitting around a table going, okay, the community needs this resource. How are we going to solve that? And then, okay, we're going to go do this. We're going to implement this plan. Well, hey, by the way, the community's not at the table, you know? So this model, the Ebied Neighborhood Promise, started around 2018 in Uptown Toledo, really centered on jobs and finances, health, housing, and education and training. And it was able to launch because of philanthropic funds that were contributed. So the ProMedica Foundation team, our social determinants of health team, and the organization overall went all in and said, we're gonna really invest in this and make sure that we take a comprehensive approach, partner where resources are available, and start to really close the gap where resources aren't, and to do it with residents, with community at the table. So at a high level, that's what the Ebied Neighborhood Promise is. We have a strong team working in Uptown Toledo, a resident coalition there that's been leading the charge. And overall, it's just centered around being able to start to bring programming to the community versus it being centered around people coming to the programs.
Right. That's pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
To know that something like that was established within communities that really address the needs of those communities. That's pretty exciting. So how did you get involved in this?
Yeah, so I've been working for ProMedica for close to 10 years, and my work actually started in some grant projects that were community health focused. So over the years, been working more and more within Lenawee County, and then that expanded to Monroe County. And as we've been working in this space and addressing social determinants of health, there's a really great opportunity to continue expanding that work across our footprint and in Michigan. So I feel really privileged and honored to be able to have an opportunity to serve as the Director of Community Impact in Michigan, where we work on community health needs, we look at our community relations and social investment, and the Adrian Ebied Neighborhood Promise. So all of it's centered around us being able to just be really intentional with our resources and to start to think differently about how our organizations work on improving the community's health. We have to rethink how we do this and how we even frame it. We have to frame it as, how do we work with the community to be more accessible, to be more available, and to make resources more attainable. So it's all part of the work really ProMedica has been spearheading with social determinants of health and really focusing on being a national leader. And we have, the opportunity now to be able to replicate programming here right in Adrian, Michigan with community partners, which is a really exciting thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had the opportunity to go with you to the Toledo Ebied Neighborhood Promise, and the nice adventure of taking the elevator. I know it's an inside joke, but to visit the different floors and to see the programs that's taking place in the supermarket on the first level, and the kitchen on the second level, and the classrooms that's available, and the coaches that's available on site as well. So is the Adrian Ebied Neighborhood Promise going to model that pretty similarly, or will there be some differences?
So the core components of the Ebied Neighborhood Promise are those 4 components, right? So health, jobs and finances, education and training, and housing. And what we've learned through our experience with this is that communities' health needs are different across communities, right? And so what this framework allows us to do is to do a detailed community planning process with residents and with stakeholders so that we can pinpoint what exact programming is needed. Mm-hmm. It allows us to do asset-based planning too, where, like we said before, we see what programming is already available. There's opportunities probably to partner with a lot of groups. So the short answer is the community helps really advise the direction in which we need to go and which programs and resources are needed, so that we have a really well-rounded and comprehensive model where everybody's supported and empowered to reach their highest potential for health. And so we do know that there's certain programs that have worked really well in the Toledo model, like financial coaching and community health workers, scholarship programs, pipelines from education to employment. So we've got some pretty good experience in seeing what does work well. And we also have learned some things along the way of things that have been challenging to lift up. But nonetheless, what we are committed to is working with the community through that strategic planning process coming up here in May and June, mm-hmm. to really land on where do we need to be implementing programming and where do we need to be partnering so that we can have the right resources within East Adrian.
Wow. So you mentioned that this steering committee is going to be working with community. So what do you mean when you say working with community?
Yeah. So within this project, it's not simply just ProMedica coming in and, hey, we have this magic solution, right? The way that we're rolling this program out to the unique aspect of Adrian, Michigan, is we're starting with partnerships. So we're partnering with the All About Adrian Resident Coalition. We're partnering with Lenawee Community Foundation to really be some of those backbone organizations that help the project from its inception to seeing, it into implementation. And with that backbone support, we also need to be able to have the community voice at the table. So what we're forming are basically an advisory committee to help during this planning process, mm-hmm. that's comprised of city, county representation, residents, community-based organizations, a really multi-sector representation and diverse representation of people from Adrian and from Lenawee, so that when we're doing this planning process, we have various levels of expertise, knowledge, and lived experience at the table, mm-hmm. so that we're not just trying to provide a prescriptive plan, but we have residents and community leaders helping to say this is what's needed, and being really involved in being the boots on the ground. So part of it's building trust with residents and being out in the community to ask what is needed and will you help support this? And the more that we have those partners from different sectors sharing a unified vision and a unified message, the more that we can continue to grow this table and we can continue to grow the expertise around the table to really make sure we're implementing the right programs and the right resources.
That's awesome. And the reason why I say that is because typically you see a lot of programs come into community, and they're programs built for the community without the input of the community. And I find that to be a very problematic approach when it comes to community development and enrichment. Because if you're focusing on building programs and don't have the input of the community, then you don't know if that's really what the community finds as a priority. So I think that the approach that ProMedica has taken with the Ebied Neighborhood Promise is rich in its approach model, making sure that community is at the table and having these conversations and identifying what's important for this community. So I think that's really important, and I think that's a very different approach. I find it to be a very different approach. I've watched programs come into neighborhoods and with the greatest intentions, and well, we all know what roads are built with good intentions. So
Sure. Well,
but
and I think that feedback's very appreciated because we take a lot of pride in this work and we've learned a lot over time. We have a really great team that helped blaze trails and to be able to put us in a position to be able to work on this in Adrian and to have our partnerships to be able to do this. But none of it happens without the community coming together, like you said. And the other thing is, this doesn't happen overnight. Right. It's a $20 million investment over 10 years. And it's 10 years because if we just commit to programming and to implementing solutions over a couple years, we're not really going to see the population health level changes that we're hoping to see, meaning we might not see improvements in health outcomes. We might not see changed lives that are more that they have more resources available, or they've built financial stability. They've been able to maybe go back to get certain degrees or programming, job training. So that's why it's so important, is because this doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
It is a lot of really detail oriented work, but also very hard work. And it has to happen over a long period of time to really be able to make sure that the systems are formed and it's not just these one-time events that keep getting offered. So that's what we're going to keep delivering on. And that's why the planning process is so important, because we're looking to shift the way that our community is working together in some of these cases. And we were going to be looking for more systems to come into place so that people are supported and that they have a team working hand in hand with them throughout the entire process.
Great. And so this program is coming to Adrian, and it's going to be placed. Let me ask you these two questions. It's coming to Adrian. Where is it going to be placed in Adrian, and why Adrian?
Yeah. So, like you said, in February, we had our press release and our press conference rather, and we announced that this initiative is happening, right? Well, behind the scenes, we actually spent about 10 months with you, with the Resident Coalition, Second Friday events, and with stakeholders that are currently working in East Adrian to just ask the question, is the Ebied Neighborhood Promise a framework that you believe will make impact and change? And is it one you're willing to support? And over the number of people we met with one-on-one, emphatically, people were saying, yes, we wish we could start this now. And so we did that because, again, we want to embrace and make sure that we're showing that this is a community-driven model. And so to your question about why East Adrian, when we're working on community health initiatives, a lot of times people look at the county level. So community health assessments are conducted, and it's like, here's all the data for Lenawee County. We've got this 150-page document about the health of Lenawee County. But when we start to hear from our community that we're serving, our organizations, when we have people come into our four walls and we hear about the transportation needs, about food insecurity, about the different social determinants of health they're experiencing, we're going, okay, but that county data isn't showing this at that rate. So what we started really looking at is taking a deeper dive into the data. We've used some mapping tools from the Centers of Disease Control to really look at where are underserved portions of the community, and they have what's called a social vulnerability index. So we've analyzed that index to look at portions of the community or census tracts that are scoring higher at risk on that scale. And when we looked at the Lenawee County map, you look at Adrian, you look at the entire county, and the coloring on the map that shows up at the higher end of the risk scale, that coloring showing up right in East Adrian. So there's 3 census tracts right along right along 52 in East Adrian that are experiencing disproportionate health disparities, and there's really a need to be able to take a deeper dive into why are those disparities being experienced and how do we better serve the community. And so that's what's really starting that, is looking at intentionally allocating our resources where they're needed and where populations are underserved currently. And it matched up with what we hear, right? Like we've heard through different initiatives with Resident Coalition, with community partners, there's need for more resources in East Adrian. But the more that we took a deeper dive into the census tract level data, we were seeing a higher percentage of populations living in poverty. So about upwards of like 34% of adults living at or below the poverty threshold. We're seeing about half of the households are rental properties, with about 17% of those being severely cost burdened. And there's just a bunch of data that we're pulling from different data sources to be able to see we really need to have an intentional focus in East Adrian. And so talking with the community partners that we met with one-on-one, hearing them say that it's needed and seeing that data really solidified with us that we need to start there.
Wow. So the data really supports the initiative for East Adrian. And it's not that any other portion of the county would be alienated from this program. Is that this is where the greatest need is.
Yep. And you're exactly right. This is a placemaking initiative, and that's also why it needs to be long-term, because placemaking within communities takes time as well. But the primary focus is investing in East Adrian to really focus on placemaking in East Adrian, so that those programs, from the health perspective to the economic vitality of the community, that we're continually looking at enriching the environment. And so if somebody, resides outside of East Adrian and they're in need of services, and they reach out to the Adrian Ebied Neighborhood Promise or a center that we have eventually, they're not going to be turned away. But the key thing that we need to really emphasize to community is we need to be investing in East Adrian to really enrich the conditions in which people live, work, and play, and to be able to make sure people have direct connectivity to those resources that they've really needed for some time now.
Right. Wow. And we know that transportation is a major issue in our community, and there's been a lot of conversation around the tables of how do we deal with this and how do we connect people to resources, knowing that transportation is a barrier. So with the Ebied Neighborhood Promise, are we looking to place that within the East Adrian community?
Yeah, so planning process will help with that too. We know what we've heard is what some of those challenges are. So in the context of an example around transportation, if we're finding the primary barrier for transportation is being able to get to work or being able to get to medical appointments, what we can be doing is looking at, okay, how can we utilize some of our resources to be able to help build capacities of current services, or to partner? Partners may have capacities to be able to provide expanded services, but we just have to come together and collaborating or partnering around a plan. And that's where we could say, okay, a non-emergency medical transportation initiative would help individuals residing in East Adrian to be able to get to their appointments. Or we could, the context of an example, maybe the planning process finds individuals are facing financial insecurity or maybe are unemployed because they're unable to get to their job, but because of a transportation barrier. And so that's where we could look at other systems or models that can help address that. And we can also learn from what's happening across the country, but we can also be innovative. So this is a space for us to say, what is unique about this situation, what's worked well, and how can we implement something directly in response to this need in Adrian.
Wow. So it's like a lot of thought.
A lot of thought, yeah. a lot of thought. And the key thing is it's not like a catalog where you just plug and play. Or you just can replicate programming. It's really thought out and intentional, because we want the programs and the resources to be designed specifically for those needs that we're finding in Adrian. And if we do it that way, and we really take the time with residents to hear their voice and to be able to understand the barriers that people are experiencing, whether it's transportation, whether it's housing, whether it's employment, we can really think about from the perspective of an individual with lived experience or who's actively trying to navigate certain systems. How do we come together as a community to be able to make that a clearer pathway?
Awesome. And so with this model coming into Adrian, what does that look when it comes to collaboration? When we've got other agencies or other organizations in town that may have a similar model when it comes to certain aspects of the Ebied Neighborhood Promise, are they going to be invited in? What is it would be conversation or connectivity with those agencies? What would that look like?
Yeah, it starts with collaboration and partnerships. So when we finalize that community plan when we finalize the Adrian Ebied Neighborhood Promise Plan, we'll have a really good idea of what programs or resources are needed. And so stakeholders and residents will come together in that planning session to really take our hats off as organizations, or to be able to put some of our organizational priorities and goals to the side, and to be able to come in and just be able to think about what would be best to implement in the community. And then as we come out of that planning, what we'll be able to do is put out requests for proposals, or we'll be able to connect with partners directly to explore what those models could look like. And so that can be, that can be partnerships, to be able to provide certain levels of service to the community, contract agreements, requests for proposals. But all of that kind of comes to fruition based on what's needed. But it's really closely knit together to where we establish agreements with partners, because we want to make sure we're agreeing to what's going to be provided for residents and what the outcomes are going to be. Mm-hmm. And part of this model too, collectively, is just making sure where programs and resources are being put into place, they're getting the outcomes that we're intending. Because if not, what we need to do is pivot to make sure residents are getting those supports that they need,
yes,
or that we have the best services available that are getting those outcomes that are really needed. So at a high level, that's what the partnerships really look like. And if we find in a scenario that we don't have a partner currently providing a specific service, then we really look at seeing is their ability to be able to bring resources into the community, that complement it. And the nice thing about this is community voice, residents are at the table as part of the advisory committee. And so when we're making decisions, that advisory committee is directly part of that process. Wow. So that's, without getting too much further into the weeds, that's really what it's centered around, is starting with the plan and really committing to the plan so that we can see how certain initiatives and programs are effective, or what ways we might need to pivot.
That's wow. Just to know that the program is, that residents are a part of this, the part of the process, which is sometimes what's absent when certain programs are developed. And it really seems that it is a resident-driven program. And I think that's going to be amazing, especially for the sustainability and the community resilience that we hope to see in neighborhoods that are marginalized and that have financial insecurities and food insecurities. Just to see that resiliency take place in those communities where there's a sense of pride that comes back, this social cohesion that's a part of it as well. So just so to have them at the table at the beginning stages of planning, I think that's huge. And I think there are a lot of other programs that can really learn from that.
Yeah. Well, and it's bigger than just having people present at the table, right? Mm-hmm. It's so much bigger than just saying, hey, we want you to come to a meeting and tell us what we should be doing. It's being involved, it's right. Being part of the team. And that's what it's really about. It's like, here's the team all sitting around the table, and residents are part of that team. And when we're embracing that, and when we're opening our ears to listen and taking that time to really soak that in, to be that sponge and to soak in, okay, how can we do better? That's when we can really start to make some significant change. The other part of it too is we talk about like those levels of participation. It's up to people how involved they want to be. So like we said, we've got the strategic planning processes or community planning process, where we're going to have 2 sessions in May and 2 sessions in June. And people can participate by coming to those sessions. They could participate by continuing to be involved in the advisory committee's monthly meetings. We have a really awesome foundation team that helps make this work even possible by securing resources and connecting with the philanthropic side of things to be able to help this happen. All the way from residents to, community partners and organizations can be involved in even monetarily contributing.
Wow.
Residents could contribute an amount that they're able to contribute financially to be able to have their hand on the project at all levels. And that's what it's really about. We're going to embrace what the community asked us to: partnerships and collaboration, to embrace culture, diversity, and to embrace what's working well, with history, arts, all those things. And when we bring that together as part of our core principles and the foundation of this, which we are going to do, I think that we'll be really pleased to see what happens 3, 6, 7, 10 years down the road. So
Wow. So at all levels, residents get to be a part of this.
Yep.
Whether it's financially contributing or having a voice when it comes to the advisory committee and the planning process and what the programs will look like. Residents, the voice of the residents matter.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think it's really great when programs can have resident voice part of it, but the other part of it too is how great is it when residents' hands are part of it.
Yeah.
When residents are able to have their hands on a project and see that their contributions are turning into tangible results.
Yeah.
That's a really great opportunity for us to be able to, it's one of the things that comes out of the Ebied Neighborhood Promise. So in the Toledo model, resident coalitions coming together, meeting monthly, but they're taking action. And actually that group, is just really setting a really great example for how residents coming together in this setting with stakeholders, those two groups can come together to really lift one another up and to make some positive change. So that's what we're really excited to be able to see.
With the neighborhood promise, the 10-year promise, I keep hearing that phrase, 10 years. What do you mean by 10 years? Like 10 years it goes away, 10 years is just to get it stable and strong, the structure?
Yeah.
Well, what does that mean?
Yeah, so the 10-year investment is really focused on this initial push to be able to look at those population health outcomes, to really build the sustainability for a lot of these programs. Because what we might find in some cases is it may be a matter of investing on the front end so that partners can expand their capacities, and then those systems are sustainable ongoing because of different streams of funding or different types of sources. There could even be the case for like payers or insurance companies to be able to start really buying into the framework for social determinants of health and other work. So ProMedica as an organization has really been working on this from that healthcare lens and from the community health lens. But for our partners, sometimes what we might find is that we can start the programming and use resources to be able to build those capacities and use that 10-year period also to build the sustainability plan. And so that's what's really important is it's not like, 10 years, we did our job,
We're gone.
Yeah. That's just the beginning, all of this, this model, the structure of it is intended to make that generational impact, that these types of resources and programmings are ones that'll live on beyond us. And that's what is really important with this, is that in doing this the right way and taking the time to make sure it's structured correctly, it'll go on beyond the 10 years. And so that's how we position it. The 10 years is really intended to be able to look at, okay, this is that window where we're going to see the most opportunity to start to shift those population health outcomes and to be able to work with community on really positioning the resources needed within the neighborhood.
Wow. So with the neighborhood promise, the kind of doing a comparison between Toledo and Adrian, you mentioned the resident coalition in Toledo. So did the Ebied Neighborhood Promise start with a resident coalition, or would that be something different between Toledo and Adrian?
Yeah, so a little bit unique to Adrian is that the All About Adrian Resident Coalition had been actively working together for years, prior to us announcing in February the ProMedica Adrian Ebied Neighborhood Promise. And so in Toledo, that resident coalition, my understanding is it was formed with this project versus it being active prior. So that's what's a little bit different is in the Toledo model, the Toledo model, we're one of the main leads versus in Adrian here on the front end, we partnered with A3 or All About Adrian Resident Coalition and Lenawee Community Foundation because of the work already happening, and to really be able to bring these groups together so that we can actually accelerate our abilities to roll out the programming. So that is one of the more unique factors. It's like, why form another coalition when there's already a resident coalition that has been doing this work? And this, I guess, is more just an example of us being able to align our resources to be able to elevate our abilities to make impact. So the announcement goes out in February that this $20 million project is coming to Adrian. When would we expect to see the manifestation of this work? Yeah, it's like we want to see it now. Like, let's get it going today. What we will be doing here, May and June, we'll have the community planning processes, and what we're going to really be working on throughout the year is identifying what programs are needed and what can we get rolling in the community. One of the things from the Toledo model is that the Toledo model has an Ebied center in Uptown Toledo. So similarly, what we'll be working through is being able to lift up a center in Adrian, being able to have programming that operates out of that center. So the answer for that question more directly, D'Angelo, is that when we get our community planning sessions completed, we're targeting to have our plan drafted like late summer, sometime in August, have it ready to go. That way we are in a position to start implementing toward the end of the year. And what we're really positioning ourselves for is January 2023 for the community to be able to see even more of those tangible results. So we're really pushing on a aggressive planning timeline because we know we can do it, one, because we have partners here, we have resident coalition already established. And so we're going to keep pushing hard to be able to see some progress here throughout the summer and leading into January 2023.
Awesome. I at the last resident coalition meeting, I see that the Ebied Neighborhood Promise is quite often on the agenda. So it's always in front of the residents, and just have that information out there, whether it's on the A3 or All About Adrian Residents Coalition's Facebook page, or being presented at the events. I see a huge presence of ProMedica at a lot of the things that the A3 Resident Coalition is doing in the community. So I think that's pretty awesome to see that community impact and collaboration on this side of it, while we're kind of fastly approaching the construction or the development of the Ebied Neighborhood Promise, the physical location and things. So I think that's pretty wonderful to see that the ProMedica is working that close with the Resident Coalition. So how did you get involved with the A3 Resident Coalition?
Yeah, so really got connected through you. So we have a Lenawee Health Network that I've been involved with chairing, and we do community health assessments. We look at community health needs, like we were saying earlier, but we're just looking at, how do we start to be able to connect more with residents? We have all of our stakeholders around the table. How do we connect with residents? And so through you hearing there's the All About Adrian Resident Coalition, is like the light bulb went off. It's like, if we could just get a little bit of time with that group to be able to understand what's needed, how can organizations be doing better? And so I can't remember exactly when the meeting was, but I remember being able to just connect with that group and attend a meeting, to be able to share just the interest, to be able to work together. And I remember being so nervous, just like, oh man, hopefully they're on board with this, and was just like completely welcomed, which was so cool. Coming from a position of, wanting to be able to see community impact and working in this space within ProMedica, what I was really hoping is there would be that just like willingness to say, yeah, let's work together. And there was, like, without a doubt, that group was like, well, we have Second Friday events. We have all these ways for you to be able to connect with community. You just got to show up. And I'm like, we'll be there. So that was the really cool part, was we just asked. All we did was just ask if we could connect to be able to know what resources could we bring to community and provide. So next thing you know, Second Friday's Veggie Mobile's there, and blood pressure screenings at a couple of them. And granted, we're, we cobbled some of those things together, but we're really looking forward to being able to continue going to Second Friday events. So residents, community, if you're interested in more information and updates on the ProMedica Adrian Ebied Neighborhood Promise, come out to Second Fridays because we'll have updates there. But there's also so much fun activities and events, local talent. I mean, you want to see the community embraced, you want to see arts embraced, come to Second Fridays, you know. So that has been one of the really big turning points, is being able just to work with A3 and being able to be present.
Yep. Yep. And if I could say this about Second Fridays, you'll see me perform there as well, at least a little bit. You know, but yeah, I think that it's fantastic that ProMedica was able to bring those resources to Second Fridays, and I think Second Fridays gives the unique opportunity to really connect directly with the residents there. A program that's designed by residents and put on by residents, and just having that opportunity and just being a present partner and a present help with that program as well. I've seen you at just about all of the Second Fridays this year and last year. Yep. So
well, mostly because it's a fun time.
Yeah.
Like, let's make sure that's understood, community. Like, Second Fridays is a fun time, and it's just great to be there. But it really is, like you said, a direct connection to residents. And so that's where we're really looking to be able to get more feedback. So we posed a question at the last Second Friday events about what improvements or programs would you like to see in the community? And what we're really looking to do here throughout this year and going forward is be able to connect with everybody at the events, so that as we're working on this initiative, one, people are aware of the progress and where we're at, but two, we're consistently making sure that we're on the right track.
Yeah. Yep. And with that thought, what improvements we would like to see? I know diversity, equity, and inclusion is always a point of conversation in the community, especially as we're trying to move to be a more aware community. So with relations to that, what is the connection with the Ebied Neighborhood Promise, and how would diversity, equity, inclusion fit into that model?
It is directly connected, and part of like the foundation of the Ebied Neighborhood Promise framework is being able to address health disparities and also racial inequities. There are a lot of systematic barriers that people have experienced throughout, going back into history, right? But some of those racial inequities still persist today. And so part of what we're doing with the Ebied Neighborhood Promise, saying, okay, let's mobilize those resources into the community, but let's also understand what is the demographic residing in the community. Part of what we talked about earlier, we said we have county health assessments, but we needed to do a deeper dive into the neighborhood level, right? Well, our county health assessment would say somewhere around like 93% of our county population is white or Caucasian, about 3% is Black or African American, and I think it's about 7% or 8% is Hispanic or Latino. Well, when we looked at the census tract level data for the 3 census tracts in East Adrian, we found that the demographic profile looked more like a population of about 65% of the population being white or Caucasian, about 5 to 8% of the population being Black or African American, and upwards of 27% of the population being Hispanic or Latino. So if we're offering programming or we're developing programming and resources, we need to have culturally linguistic resources. We need to make sure that we have bilingual resources, and regardless of what programming we're offering, we need to make sure it's culturally linguistic.
Yeah.
So that's really part of the emphasis. We'll have staff that are hired as part of the team for the Adrian Ebied Neighborhood Promise. And we need to have a diverse team that not only can provide services, so being bilingual is one thing, but being part of the culture is the other.
I think it's really important that that's something that's looked at as programs are developed, and that they're developed intentionally with that in mind, so that those issues and topics are addressed on the front end versus trying to figure out how to clean up problems as programs develop and move on. And that way there's diversity at all levels of employment, at all levels of the structure of it, whether that's the board or whatever the leaders will be in this particular program. It's something that I've noticed with the Resident Coalition, is that there is a nice diversity with the board there, and that it really captures the voice of different cultures within the community, so that every culture is represented at the level. And it's something that I'm always concerned about when I'm thinking of different programs coming into community. Does this program or does this organization capture all the voices of the different cultures that's represented in the community that they're going to serve? So I think that's a really important topic to be addressed, and even that bilingual service. We know we have some from language. First language is Spanish speaking individuals in our community, and what does that look like when they walk into a building looking for services?
Yep. And that's, like you were saying, it's so needed to design those resources on the front end, because many residents have probably lost hope when they've navigated certain services and there's the language barrier, or they aren't able to access them because they're not culturally linguistic. And throughout the 10-month process, when we were meeting with different stakeholders and with residents, something that we heard consistently is people were saying systems are often difficult to navigate and people have often lost hope.
Yeah.
They've lost hope because it's so challenging to navigate. Imagine how difficult it is to navigate if those resources aren't available in your primary language spoken. So it's got to be bigger than just being able to have, translation services or somebody that's able to provide a flyer in a different language. It's got to be bigger than that. We have to think bigger to be able to make that impact, and that's part of what we'll continue embracing.
That is fantastic to hear. Just to know that's considered, and that's going to be part of the process as well. So I think that's really important and fantastic to know that the Ebied Neighborhood Promise is going to capture that as it's moving forward, and that the voice of the residents that is not falling on deaf ears, and that they're a part of the process in the beginning. They're still a part of it, and when everything comes to fruition, that they'll still be right there, guiding the Ebied Neighborhood Promise, or the Adrian Ebied.
Yeah, there we
Promise.
go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So I'm pretty excited about the work that's taking place with ProMedica and the inclusivity that's available for the residents and other agencies and partners. And the conversations I've been at, quite a few of the conversations that we've had with other organizations and potential partners regarding what they hope to see, and it's sometimes what the disconnects are and what the gaps are in services, and how community could be better served when it comes to that. So I'm excited about the Ebied Neighborhood Promise. I got the Adrian Ebied Neighborhood Promise. I keep I keep talking about that in numerous circles, and I've even went to a different community and say, hey, we've got this come into our community, and their question was, well, how do we get it in our community? And I said, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
well, and that's really an interesting point to talk about, because we have an opportunity to be able to pave a path for other communities, right? What we're doing is looking at how do we design this model specific to the community's needs, and how can we support other communities in being able to do something similar. So like we said, it requires funding, it requires resources, it requires strong partnerships, but within the organization of ProMedica, we've had a lot of experience with this model. And that's why we've really been able to come into this space and connect with partners, because we've learned a lot along the way. So it's even bigger than our efforts that we currently have going. Not that we're gonna get off track with that, but we have the opportunity to do this really well and to be able to show those other communities that are looking for hope that there's a way to be able to do this as well.
Thank you. And Frank Nagle, I thank you for taking the time out your schedule to come be on the show with me and to just to bring this rich information to our audience as well.
D'Angelo, I really appreciate the opportunity. I also appreciate everything that you do for a community. And I just want to be able to say thank you to the residents, to the All About Adrian Resident Coalition, to Lenawee Community Foundation, and to everybody that's helped really make this happen. This hasn't just been an initiative that happened overnight. Like we said, this has been something that's been worked on behind the scenes, but none of it is able to happen without really our partners coming together and the opportunity to be able to connect with residents and community. So thank you very much. And if anybody's interested in more information, like we said, you can find more information at Second Fridays. We'll have information posted on promedica.org here in the near future. In the meantime, people can contact me. Where we can certainly put out my email address or put it into maybe the to the YouTube link so that people have it. But really appreciate the time to be able to join you today. So thank you.
Thank you. This is Frank Nagel with ProMedica, and this has been One Voice Lenawee. Thank you for joining us. And please, every second and fourth Monday of the month, right here on YouTube, 6 p.m., come be a part of the show. And again, if you haven't clicked that subscribe button, don't wait for tomorrow. Don't wait for later. What you can do right now, click that subscribe button, become a part of our community. Thank you for joining us.